As Blake said, major breaking news as we come on the air. There is the singer of Richmond, north of Richmond, part of the new Trump rally playlist. He is speaking at a rally in Florida, and for the first time in recent memory, political memory, Donald Trump is not the story for the day. For 11 days, Trump has not been Trump. He has said nothing crazy. He has played golf and stood back as Democrats fought with each other. So who exactly is telling him to be smart, and why is he listening? For the past 10 days, the press corps have treated Joe Biden and Democrats like they treated Trump for the past 10 years. And no matter what you think of any party or any candidate, scrutiny, real scrutiny, tough questions, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for democracy. It's a good thing for our country. And we are finally having a fair conversation in Washington. Because finally, reporters are asking tough questions, legitimate questions, fair questions about the president's health.
I just wondered, have the last 12 days made you reconsider any specific statements that you might have made in recent months on that issue?
I appreciate the question. I really do, and the opportunity. I think there has been moments here when I have said, and especially in the gaggle, I think, and actually yesterday, if I have, said misled in something that I've said or haven't had the full information, I actually own up to that.
So perhaps what else are we not being told full information about? And that's important tonight, especially when it comes to Jill Biden and her new role as gatekeeper, campaigner-in-chief, and some criticism that she is effectively now inside the White House acting as a shadow president. The White House tonight, emphasis might be winning the civil war inside the Democratic Party to keep Mr. Biden as the Democratic nominee. It's still ongoing. 7 p.m. here in Washington. And every night that the sun sets with Joe Biden as the nominee, every day he holds on is another day closer to the convention and the election. The calendar works in Joe Biden's favor. So with that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television. And first tonight, Biden is winning the civil war right now. And it is a war. It's that simple. And watch over the next few days, especially for Biden supporters, to try to pivot away. And that's the important part. Democrats need something to coalesce around. They can't. They won't coalesce around Joe Biden because they will get crushed if Biden is the message for the election. Donald Trump is playing this beautifully. Like him, hate him, whatever you think of him, he's playing this very well. The pro-Biden faction is going to try to focus solely and entirely on Trump. And since Trump isn't saying anything wild these days, they have focused on something called Project 2025. Here are some of the talking points.
Project 2025 will slowly but surely strip away our rights.
It will mean the end of democracy.
Is a MAGA world manifesto.
The GOP's version of Mein Kampf.
To be completely fair, Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025. It has nothing to do with his campaign. It's a document put out by a group called the Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative think tank. But just watch over the next few days and weeks. You're going to hear a lot about Project 2025. That is the pivot. And now the problem for Mr. Biden. He may be able to win the battle here and stay on for a few more days. But that does not win him the war. From the New York Times, yet another editorial. This is the second New York Times editorial telling him to step aside. The Democratic Party must speak the plain truth to the president. President Biden clearly understands the stakes, but he seems to have lost track of his own role in this national drama. As the situation has become more dire, he has to come to regard himself as indispensable. He does not seem to understand that he is now the problem and that the best hope for Democrats to retain the White House is for him to step aside. Here's the polling. Because to win re-election, Biden almost certainly needs to win Wisconsin. A new poll shows him down 6 points. Biden is hemorrhaging. Trump 44, Biden 38. That's why today reporters for the first time ran around Capitol Hill chasing Democratic members of Congress and demanded answers about the Democratic president. It was wild. In fact, some Democrats, we'll show you the video later, put on headphones to avoid reporters' questions. Reporters did it for years with Republicans about Trump, but this is the first time about Democrats. Here's Congressman Steve Cohen, Democrat, after he left a meeting of House Democrats.
You all on the same page?
No. What do you mean you're not on the same page? They're not even in the same book.
And that right there is the problem for Democrats. They are united in hating Trump, unquestionably, but totally divided on Biden. Congressman Glenn Ivey supports Joe Biden. He is going to be with us in a minute. But we start with Geraldo Rivera, NewsNation correspondent at large. Geraldo, it is good to see you as always, my friend. Look,
thank you, buddy.
You've got two things going on here, right? You've got the Democrats raising the stakes. This is Mein Kampf. Trump is Hitler, on and on and on. And then the next breath from the pro-Biden team is, and Joe Biden is the only guy who can save America. They seem to be contradictory arguments.
I get you. Let me just agree with you that the wind is out of the sails of the dump Biden movement. I think there's been a meaningful slowing down of that whole trend. Over the weekend, it seemed imminent. Then Monday was the showdown day, and then Monday came, and all the members coming back to Washington, and they all cooled their jets, checked with the people back home, even with the terrible polling that has been seeping out in the last 12 hours or so that shows him losing in battleground states like Wisconsin. It does seem as if the whole 25th Amendment coup has ended, that Biden has survived.
There was never going to be a 25th Amendment, and the president can recertify himself. That's silly. But you say the wind's out of the sails, and I'm not sure you're right, because every day we're talking about this. The wind may have died down, but every day we're talking about this is a day that hurts Joe Biden. It's a day that there's more questions. Nancy Pelosi has yet to give her endorsement. Huge Democrat. Jim Clyburn, who is the man who gave Biden the 2020 nomination effectively by delivering South Carolina. He still is not going out on TV with full-throated support. Schumer says, I'm with Joe. That's it. Obama, one tweet 10 or 11 days ago, and then nothing. No fundraising emails. And Hakeem Jeffries, the House minority leader, probably the least important of the group, is in there. Maybe premature victory for Team Biden, huh?
Well, yes, but you have, 9 members total in the House of Representatives that have announced that they're asking the President of the United States not to run for re-election. There are over 200 members in the Democratic caucus. It's a very small percentage. Yes, there are people who attract a lot of attention. And the New York Times editorials, the two of them, as you noted, have been breathtaking in their boldness in going after President Biden. Me, as someone who cares very much for him, as a patriot, as a voter, I don't know about a voter, but I want him to succeed. I worry today at NATO, the 75th anniversary summit. I worry every time he goes out on stage. Is he going to find, the right mark? Is he going to blow the teleprompter? Is he going to pin the Presidential Merit Award of Freedom on the wrong person? I worry. I hold my breath as he shuffles around. But I do believe that the edge is off. I think there has to be something else now. It's not enough to have the debate from 2 weeks ago and that moment, that awful gut-wrenching moment. Now you need something else. Now you need more than the New York Times. You need Schumer to say something.
You need some other moment.
Fair.
You need Pelosi. Well, you need Pelosi or Obama to say something, right? And they've so far held their powder. To me, those are the two most important people around, Clinton being the other one. This is renewed focus, and you say this because you've known and covered Joe Biden for decades. These people are sort of interesting people, Joe Biden especially, the more you dig in to his family, his relationship with Jill Biden. And Jill Biden, as First Lady, is now taking on a very, very different role. Here's her on MSNBC back in January.
I know you have a pretty big policy platform now.
Well, when we came into office, I knew that I wanted to work on what I've always worked on, military families, cancer, and education. And now I have a new initiative, which is the Women's Health Research Initiative, because women's health has been underfunded always.
Jill can, and I'll ask it as a question, can Jill Biden run for president for Joe Biden?
Yes, and she's doing it. I don't know how successful it will be. It reminds me a little bit of Hillary in the 90s when Bill was running, and she wanted to have the health.
Oh, come on, Geraldo. No, these are totally different things. It's one thing for Hillary Clinton to have wanted to have some policy portfolio and sort of act as co-president because they were both young and she was queen of women's lib. It's a whole nother thing for Jill Biden to take the role of shadow president because her husband isn't on his A game after 8 p.m.
Rather than fight with you over that particular comparison, let me just say that nothing that Dr. Jill Biden has done, whether recently or in the recent past, bothers me. She seems a very competent, reasonable, measured, prudent, normal person. I am comforted by the fact that Joe Biden, who I have severe questions about, has her as a rock, has her as his anchor in these turbulent times. And to point at it in any scandalous way, I think is alarmist. I don't believe that it diminishes Joe that Jill is being more active or has a more visible role.
We have some video, right, of Jill Biden leading Joe Biden off the debate stage. We remember the clips of Jill Biden speaking to Joe Biden almost like he was a student at school in 5th grade who spelled everything correctly after the debate. You're not alarmed by the fact that the First Lady is now the gatekeeper rather than fulfilling the role of First Lady?
Well, it's obvious to me. And Joe Biden is only 8 months older than I am. I constantly say that. I walk sometimes with the same shuffle that he often displays. My wife, Erica, often gives me her arm and leads me around, so I can successfully navigate some treacherous steps or whatever it is. To me, that's a symbol of a first family. And I think that compare it with the other first family. Does Donald Trump have any of the trappings of the American family? Is it helpful to him? I'm not going to.
I'm going to leave you with this.
I love Melania too. I think that she's very underrated. But I think that to criticize Joe Biden for her activism is wrong.
I'm going to give you a win on the end. Okay. There is no way that Joe Biden could have done the past 8 minutes of an interview that you just did. None. You may be only a couple of months younger. You got way more going on, my friend. It's good to see you, as always.
Thank you, Leland. You too.
Yeah, thank you. President Biden can stay on the ticket, of course. It's up to him. Maybe it's up to Jill to a certain extent. Only he can step down. Why that might not matter to the rest of his party. Live pictures of Donald Trump's rally. Will Donald Trump effectively stay silent once again? Will he give Democrats the exit strategy they need? Will he send them a life preserver next? Breaking news just the past few hours, another leak in President Biden's dam, if you will. Mikey Sherrill of New Jersey has joined the list of 8 other Democrats calling on Biden to drop out of the race. Quite literally, the Democratic caucus is divided on President Joe Biden. A number of people, very important ones, won't speak, among them Nancy Pelosi. Remember, Republicans spent 2016 divided on Donald Trump, and the similarities of what we are seeing are stunning.
Fighting spirit and pride and courage that served the country so well 4 years ago helped Joe Biden win. We'll bring the ticket down this time. He just has to step down because he can't win. And my colleagues need to recognize that.
This has become not so much maybe about the president, that's certainly important, but for a lot of members of the Democratic caucus, both in the House and the Senate, their own seats are at risk. Take a listen.
Joe Biden may be in slightly worse shape in these particular polls, but the fact is when Biden's down 4, 5, 6 points in these polls, you can only run so far ahead of Joe Biden. At this particular point, at least in the race for the House, it does seem like Republicans are ahead because Donald Trump is so far ahead.
With us now, Congressman Glenn Ivey of Maryland, member of the House Judiciary Committee, friend of the show, and a supporter, ardent supporter, I would say, of Joe Biden. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Start with this. How do Democrats, specifically those who support Joe Biden in the way you do and are vocal about it, stop the trickle of defections?
Well, it may be slowing down on its own. I think the point that Geraldo was making a few minutes ago is pretty significant. I think we're at, 8, 9 or something like that out of 200, and I think it's 12. That's not a big number, and it certainly isn't a divided caucus in the way, one might think based on some of the commentary that's coming out in the media in general. So I don't think we're in a particularly bad place, especially if we can sort this out over the next week or two and see if it runs its course. I think, he did well at the NATO speech today, and he's had a series of good speeches and appearances. So if he keeps moving forward like that, I think we'll be okay.
Look, the NATO speech, 30 minutes on the teleprompter, no major gaffes or big moments. It was at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. If that's the bar, fine. You point out some of the things that have happened since the debate. Not all of them have been stellar performances. Take a listen.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman, served with a black president. I'm proud to be the first black woman in the Supreme Court.
And by the way, I was in that World War I cemetery in France, and the one that one of our colleagues, the former president, didn't want to go and be up there. I probably shouldn't even say it anyway.
Did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
These are not emblematic of a man who just had one bad night. And you've laid out, I know quite articulately, why Democrats feel the stakes are so high in this election. And if they are so high, why are you okay taking a chance, a risk, whatever you want to call it, on a man in the president who, however well-intentioned, clearly is on the decline cognitively?
It's interesting. We just had a hearing last week in the Judiciary Committee, and Congressman Hank Johnson put together a series of clips of Donald Trump making misstatements and gaffes and incorrect statements. I think we can do that for people. If you speak enough in public, you can put those things together. And I don't know that really whether Trump has more gaffes or Biden has more gaffes is going to determine the election. At the end of the day, I think what we need to do is focus back on his accomplishments, which are significant. As I've said before, I think he is probably the most consequential president since LBJ. Certainly the legislative production backs that up. And then he's got to talk about the vision going forward and what needs to be done. With respect to the economy, I think in particular, the United States is the envy of the Western world right now. But we've got to make sure that people who aren't, beyond the macro level understand that there are benefits for their personal pocketbooks as well. So,
Congressman, I hear
to go.
You in terms of gaffes versus gaffes. I think we can all agree that at the debate, it was clear one person was far more confused in moments than the other. Don't ask me, ask the voters. Just in the past 10 days, because of the polls, Arizona, from a toss-up to lean red. That's a Cook Political Report, about as nonpartisan you get. Georgia, toss-up to lean red. Minnesota, likely Democrat to lean Democrat. New Hampshire, likely Democrat to lean Democrat. Nevada, toss-up to lean red. This is not good, and I've yet to hear a Democrat articulate how President Biden can personally turn around? Because the facts on the ground haven't changed, which changes people's view of him. How can he turn that around when he can do one event a day and normally they've got to wrap up by 5 p.m.?
Actually, I think you just heard from Geraldo how he can turn it around. I think the key thing is to get beyond the debate about the debate and get back to the focus on the issues the American public cares about. Mostly the economy, but also
I'll give you the last word.
I'll
give you the last word, sir. But the American people care deeply about whether the President of the United States at 3 a.m. can answer the call and make a coherent decision and not be like the guy we saw at the debate who couldn't figure out whether he ended Medicaid or ended COVID.
You know, as you pointed out a moment ago, his polling has dropped, but only by a couple of percentage points. I mean, judging by the media, you'd think he'd fallen entirely through the floor and was like 20 or 30 behind Trump in all of these battleground states. And he's not. He's within the margin of error for most of the states. And my recollection is he's ahead in Michigan. So we're a few points down, and it's definitely within striking distance. This is a winnable race. And I think once we get past all of this, because this can only go around and around so much unless there's some other big problem that pops up, sooner or later we're going to have to be able to get back to the debate on the issues and also a focus on President Trump and the many crazy things that he said, not just over the years, but at the debate. I mean, it was one lie after another, especially with respect to abortion and some of the key issues. If we can get back to those pieces, I think we're going to be fine.
Fair enough. Congressman Ivey, I always appreciate you coming on, a robust conversation. As we noted during the break, there's a number of your colleagues who are running away. One wore headphones as they ran away from the press, something you won't do, and that's worth applauding. And your constituents and the country are better for it, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. You're always welcome. A key Democratic donor says Team Biden is acting like Team Trump. It's the ultimate insult. What will the press do now? Plus, liberal comics are coming after Biden. Why that is no laughing matter. Continue with the breaking news, awaiting President Trump to take the stage at his first rally since July 4th, and some of the bigger questions about President Biden. We'll let you know if he has anything to say about the current president and the current president's health. Of course, there's a few people who could clear up concerns about President Biden's health, at least tell us what's going on, maybe. His doctors. They know him pretty well. Dr. Kevin O'Connor is the White House physician, close family friend to the Biden family, one-time business associate of Jim Biden. He's the one who writes the letter saying Biden is in excellent health every year, but will never give an interview. Then there's Dr. Kevin Kennard, expert on Parkinson's disease, neurology consultant to the White House Medical Unit, physician to the president, who visited the White House 8 times in 8 months. And to be fair, maybe the White House shouldn't put out his doctors to talk to the media. Let's reverse 4 years, look back, when Donald Trump had COVID. And the White House back then let reporters talk to President Trump's doctors. It did not go well.
He has not received any supplemental oxygen?
He's not on oxygen right now, that's right.
He has not received any at all?
He's not needed any this morning, today at all. That's right.
Has he ever been on supplemental oxygen?
Right now, he is not on oxygen.
I know you keep saying right now, but should we read into the fact that he had been previously?
Yesterday and today, he was not on oxygen.
Jeff Mason remembers those days well. He used to be chief of the White House Correspondents Association and covers the White House for Reuters. Hey, it's good to see you, my friend. Thank you. You and I were there, I think, at that press conference.
It's been a while.
Yeah. What strikes me more than anything is how surprised this White House is by how quickly the press, I want to say, shifted on them.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yes. I mean, in terms of a shift being really intense and really robust questioning about the president's health, because they've spent months, if not years, sort of batting away those types of questions as irrelevant or unfair or not appropriate.
And by and large, the press sort of went along with that, and there was not a lot of hard-hitting stories about President Biden's health. And now all of a sudden, there is. And there's a lot of anger by the left. MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell. Take a listen.
If you saw any of the White House press briefing today, it was the White House press corps, many of them, at their absolute worst in the way they approached Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, who was trying to be responsive to medical questions where there were limitations on what she could say.
Which is interesting because it's very different than what Lawrence O'Donnell said back during Trump's time. This is in 2020 when Trump had COVID. How many times will Trump's doctor, who's actually not an MD, have to change his statements, referring to the press conference we showed at the top of this? If the White House wanted to put out President Biden's doctors to talk freely and openly, there's nothing preventing them from that, right?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I'm the wrong guy to ask. You have to ask the White House that.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, from the White House press corps' perspective, what seems to not be being answered that needs to be?
Well, if you look at yesterday's briefing, there was just a list of questions about this man, this doctor who had come to the White House who was a neurologist. And it turns out, I think the answer is that doctor never looked at President Biden, other than the 3 times over the last 3 years in which he had a neurologist look at him for his physical. But they weren't able to say that, and it sort of came out. Karine implied that, and then the Dr. O'Connor ended up more or less saying that in a letter that came out later last night.
Yeah, but
it didn't come out in that briefing.
Here's the letter. Dr. Kennard was the neurologist specialist that examined Biden for each of his annual physicals. Fine. President Biden has not seen a neurologist outside his annual physical. That leaves open a lot to interpretation. Dr. Kennard was chosen for this responsibility not because he is a movement disorder specialist, but because he is a highly trained and highly regarded neurologist. Again, none of these either A, close the door, or B, allow the press to ask and receive basic answers to the questions, right?
You know, I spoke to a former White House official yesterday, and that official said that they had been treated by this doctor for, I think it was migraines.
Okay.
So to me, that was quite interesting because it was sort of filling in the blanks that the White House spokesperson and the White House writ large wasn't doing. They're trying to suggest this is a doctor who treats other people on campus. I think that's probably very true, but you're right. They left this.
Other things could be true.
They left this big opening of, why else was he here, and especially at a time when there are questions about the president's cognitive ability.
Is the White House going to be able to go back to nothing to see? We're not going to answer questions about the president's health. It's all a conspiracy theory.
Well, I don't think you can unsee the debate. And the White House knows that. The Democratic Party knows that. The Republican Party knows that. The job I think that President Biden and his advisors right now are trying to fulfill or trying to do is to show that that was a one-off. And that's hard. That's hard to do because they don't put President Biden out for super regular press conferences or super regular opportunities where he has to think on his feet the way he did the night of that debate. He is doing a press conference this week.
I was going to say Thursday.
We'll see how that goes. We saw how the George Stephanopoulos interview went, but those are unusual.
You got a question for him on Thursday?
Yeah, absolutely.
You going to tell us what it is?
No, sir.
All right. Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
Thank you. Something is happening about President Biden's age that is terrible for him. Terrible for the country, too. It's not a good thing. It's becoming a joke. And the joke isn't about his love life, like Bill Clinton, or his arrogance, a la Barack Obama. It's about his ability to be president. And those jokes are coming from late-night comics, the kind of New York liberals that love Joe Biden. Here's Stephen Colbert.
And self-sacrifice takes a particular kind of courage. And that is a courage I believe Joe Biden is capable of. I believe he's a good enough man, he is a good enough president to put the needs of the country ahead of the needs of his ego. And however painful that might be, it is possible handing leadership to a younger generation is the right thing for the greater goodest. Or good as, either one.
A reference to his George Stephanopoulos interview. There's the problem. Late-night comics making fun of presidents is as old as Johnny Carson, or my favorite, Jay Leno, who used to do fake interviews with presidents.
Are there any women left you haven't hit on?
No. No, not after 8 years in Washington.
Any women you've been with ever turn out to be a man?
I had more than one of them, too.
Everybody knew Clinton ran around on his wife. Nobody cared. Comments could joke about it without wounding him politically. Now, Jon Stewart is laying out a timeline to replace Joe Biden.
It's 119 days. There are contestants on The Bachelor who haven't even met yet that will get married and divorced between now and the election. We have nothing but time. And by the way, I am in no way saying Biden's got to drop out, but can't we stress test this candidacy? Can't we open up the conversation? Do you understand the opportunity here?
Yeah, the White House doesn't want there to be an opportunity. They don't want the conversation. They don't want the stress test. They don't want any daylight. And here's why. Last year, we told you that 2024 wasn't 1980 all over again with Carter and Reagan. It was 1968. You can see Lyndon Johnson above my shoulder. And Johnson dropped out of the race, the first and only sitting president of modern time to do it. Back then, Johnson reportedly watched a CBS News report from Walter Cronkite about the war in Vietnam. Johnson said, when I lost Cronkite, I lost America, lost middle America. Johnson then dropped out. It's a political wives' tale. It may not be exactly true in terms of the words, but it captured the moment. When Joe Biden loses Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, he has lost his last defenders. And right now, there is nothing to talk about other than Joe Biden. We'll see if Donald Trump changes that. He's taking the stage in just a minute. We'll see you then. Take the stage, 7:45 Eastern. This is Trump's first event in 11 days. For the first time in many years, Donald Trump is not dominating the headlines, and he seems just fine with that. He's made a few appearances since the debate. June 27th was the debate. June 28th was a rally. July 4th, virtual remarks. He did a phone interview to Sean Hannity, said nothing. July 11th, held a rally in Doral, Florida. In fact, one pro-Biden Twitter account is now complaining that Trump isn't out there more. Former White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor Mick Mulvaney is with us. Boy, don't you wish you had this problem when you were at the White House?
Listen, I think he's doing exactly the right thing. I think he learned from the mistake of the first 2020 debate. There's a rule in politics, you know it as well as anybody. When your opponent is digging a hole, you don't take away their shovel. And Donald Trump took Joe Biden's shovel away in that first debate in 2020. And there was an instant during the debate last week where I could sort of see it in his eyes. He looked over, realized Joe wasn't on that night, and then Donald Trump got out of the way and let Joe keep digging.
There have been many times, though, that Donald Trump's enemies were digging with shovels, and he took away the shovel. We have a few of those moments. Take a listen.
That Hillary, as I say, crooked Hillary. It could be we're going to run against Crazy Bernie. That could be. Could be Crazy Bernie. Crying Chuck. Crazy Nancy. I tell you what, I've been watching her. We're going to win this state, and then we're going to tell crooked Joe Biden, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired.
That's not real crazy.
Okay, what's wrong with that? I was at that last one.
Right. I was going to say
Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Right. That's not real crazy. Who's he listening to now all of a sudden?
I think himself more than anybody else. I think he's simply learning the process. Right. Keep in mind, he's only run for president 3 times. I mean, he's not run for 40 or 50 years. He's not been in politics for 40, 50 years. And this is a business just like anything else. That being said, I do understand that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita are giving really good advice, and he's listening to them. So he's got a good team. It's a professional team. Remember, 2016, it was sort of a cast of misfits. Whoever couldn't get a job with somebody else would work for Donald Trump. Now, everybody in the world wants to work for him because he's the biggest name in Republican politics. So he's getting good advice. He's giving himself good advice. You open by saying, he's been out of the news, and that's unusual. He's up in the polls, and that's what really counts.
Right, no, he is up in the polls against Joe Biden. He is not up in the polls against Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. Does that play into a decision that has to be made in the next 7 days, which is his vice president pick?
I go back and forth on this. I think his VP is his VP. I don't think it makes a difference. I think he's assuming he's running against Joe Biden. And I think that's a safe bet. I think there's a 40% chance it's not Joe Biden, but odds are it's going to be Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is vice president. So I think that's what he's expecting to play against, and that will go into his VP decision.
Yeah, which will not be tonight, right? We're not going.
I don't think so.
You don't want that out there.
Well, I got a text from the campaign saying, tune in to my show tonight, Doral. Maybe I'll announce my vice presidential pick. That's a smart move from a campaign perspective. I don't see it just because I don't think the audience is there tonight. He's going to have to ramp this up, and I think Monday is the deadline for having to do something in order to have the person nominated at the convention.
Real quick. Is there a world in which Donald Trump as a candidate fundamentally changed? We're going to look back on that debate and say, different guy.
Ordinarily, I'd say no. I say about both Biden and Trump. That Trump's in his late 70s, Biden's in his early. People don't change that much at that age. But I remember seeing this during the debate when he leaned over. I can't remember what Biden said, but Trump sort of looked at him sideways like this, and all of a sudden his demeanor changed. I wonder if that's when he didn't realize that Joe wasn't all there, and there's really very little that Trump had to do to make Biden look bad. Biden was doing it for himself.
And you say 40% chance that Joe Biden drops out, in which case Kamala Harris would likely be the nominee. Almost certainly. And then she would have to choose a vice president. We'll have that when we come back. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
All right, Donald Trump is walking out right now, so that means they're playing Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA at the rally. If I have my rally playlist feelings correct, Donald Trump will reportedly announce his vice president pick later this week. Could be Friday, could be perhaps over the weekend. And now we are going to do a segment as we wait for Donald Trump, wildly speculating about a vice presidential pick, not for Donald Trump, but for Kamala Harris. And it's not us jumping the gun. It's the ladies of The View. They have moved on from Joe Biden. So today they asked Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer about being Kamala's number 2.
You say Kamala is the heir apparent. Would you run for her? Would you run as her vice president?
You know what? I have never looked at opportunities in Washington, D.C. with a lot of excitement because I love Michigan. I love state government because I know when we're feeding 1.4 million Michigan school kids free breakfast and lunch, I can see what it means to people. And that's why I love state government. But, I'll never say never.
New York Times is jumping in, too. Governors Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Andy Beshear of Kentucky, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Former Obama campaign advisor Amisha Cross is with us. We just love these segments, don't we?
They're really exciting. I feel like this is almost like the lotto at this point.
Just somebody's going to get it, right? Okay. Look, I think is it a reasonable conversation, you think? And from the world you're seeing, is the feeling of Democrats need a plan B expanding or contracting?
I think it's contracting. Look, we've already had the chair of the CBC come out full-throatedly in support of
Congressional Black Caucus.
Congressional Black Caucus in support of Joe Biden. We know that the black vote has been the key vote for the past 40 years for the Democratic nominee. We also recognize that we saw Chuck Schumer, we saw Leader Jeffries. All of them have aligned around him, including members of the Squad, the far left faction of the Democratic Party. I think that what we're seeing here is people being reactionary, quite frankly, to a media firestorm that seems to not end. The New York Times is basically trying to seal the death nail for Joe Biden and won't get off of it. But in addition to that, this is a ratings thing. The View last week and earlier this week talked almost incessantly about the importance of having Joe Biden on this ticket. So today, they knew that they were going to have Gretchen Whitmer come and be a guest. And because she is a name that has been tossed around, they did what they had to do.
There's an interesting dynamic right now that's happening in terms of women, right? Because you have Kamala Harris as the first female vice president. But then you've got Jill Biden, who is now taking this completely larger role in the campaign. We have a little bit of her sound since the debate.
Joe Biden, do you have any message to House Democrats who are calling for your husband to drop out of the race? How are you feeling about the state of the race? All right, ladies.
And then she didn't answer any questions. Is the White House ready? I understand somebody wants to defend their husband. Do you see the White House is ready for the firestorm that's going to come at Jill Biden if she continues this role?
I think that the White House is ready. Do I believe that the White House was ready for the fallout that came after that debate and how long it has lasted? Absolutely not. I don't think that his campaign was either. But Jill Biden is a very strong woman. And we know that if anything has proven true over the years, it is that the man on the front is only as strong as the woman who's standing next to him. And we've seen that in various campaigns. Barack Obama was just as strong as Michelle was leading the way. We saw it with Bill and Hillary.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say this is different, right? She's now campaigning more than he is. She's becoming the gatekeeper in the White House. You said how the campaign wasn't ready for his debate performance. The White House wasn't. How can they be ready for the attacks that are going to start coming? Is Joe Biden first lady or is Joe Biden shadow president?
Well, she's his most popular surrogate on the campaign trail as first lady, and that's not unusual for a first lady. I do think that she's out here doing what she has to do. She's speaking to the American people. She's talking about the strength of her husband's presidency. She's also talking to them and meeting them where they are. One of Jill Biden's strongest focus areas is the fact that she connects with people. That is a strength on this campaign trail. It's been her strength since she's been in the White House.
Strength, the flip side of that is she's a lot stronger on the campaign trail, you could argue, than Kamala Harris is in some ways. New York Times, Kamala Harris, the challenge of getting ready without getting ready. Biden says he won't step aside, but if he does, here's why Kamala Harris is the favorite to replace him. You get the last 30 seconds. There's still a chance this happens, right?
It's not going to happen. Joe Biden has said full-throatedly he is not going to step down from this ticket. And the only person who can make that decision is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden told us the only way that he would is if God basically came down and told him. The good Lord isn't going to make that decision, and Joe Biden isn't either.
All right. Well said. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Donald Trump's about to take the stage. What news he makes we'll cover tomorrow in War Notes. warnotes.com to subscribe. That is our free daily newsletter that comes out with our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. And today we covered how for 11 days Donald Trump has managed not to make news and allow Democrats to fight among themselves. Will that continue tonight? And also, when is he going to finally pick his vice president? We'll have that tomorrow. Chris is next from New York.